During the 90s, Marvel sold a lot of the rights to their famous characters to various film studios so that they could produce films. But it wasn't until we had successes like X-Men and Spider-Man that studios really started to take advantage of these, and every single studio wanted their own Marvel hit. Hence, we started to see a whole slew of different films such as The Fantastic Four, Daredevil, The Punisher, Hulk, etc. These efforts were by and large hit and miss. And the days of the Marvel Cinematic Universe were just a few years away when Marvel would start producing its own films, and would of course eventually come under the umbrella of Disney. But during the early 2000s, when a lot of these studio-owned Marvel films were being produced, ToyBiz held the Marvel license for its action figures. And it was around this time they began to experiment with the now famous Marvel Legends line. But they also explored doing a high-end 12-inch collector's line or a 1/6 scale line. This line, called the Marvel Studios line or the Marvel Films line, was aimed at producing figures both of the films but also the comic book characters. Sadly, this was a very short-lived line, and it's a real shame because I think there were some really great figures in this. So today, I'm going to be taking a look at the Punisher. Not the Punisher from the film, starring Thomas Jane, that was released around this time, and of course they did do a version of this figure, but the comic version. Now, these figures came in quite strange packaging. I've never seen packaging quite like this before or since. It is essentially a giant plastic shell that sort of arches in at a sort of diagonal effect on the sides, which is very difficult to see from this view, but you have the flat front face here, and then the two sides sort of arch inwards. So the overall shape is more like a diamond sort of shape. As you can see, there's very little branding on this packaging. We can see a small banner strip at the top there saying it is a 12-inch collector's edition, and at the bottom we have a slightly thicker card branding which tells you the name of the character and actually has a really cool comic book image there, which I really like that. Meanwhile, on the reverse we have a grayscale image of the figure itself, and then of course that full colour comic book image, which is pretty cool, with a little bit of information about the character beneath it. But comparatively, the reverse panel is much slimmer and narrower than the front of the packaging. And the plastic shell is very, very flimsy. It is just what it looks like. It's not a very sturdy shell. It is held together by plastic clips that go through this hole. That's what holds the base, which is a plastic base and a plastic top, and it's just those two clips. So if you lose those clips, this packaging is going to fall apart. So you've got to make sure you keep hold of them, because that's what holds the whole frame together. The minute you remove them, the whole packaging collapses in on itself, as you can see here. So, whilst the packaging is quite nice on display, it displays the figure very nicely, I have to say I find this packaging irritating as hell, just because it so often wants to fall apart, and it's big and it's quite bulky too, so it's not particularly easy for storage. Thankfully there were only a few in the line, I suppose, so it's not that much of a headache, but nevertheless it is quite tricky to display these. Okay, and here he is out of the packaging, and I have to say, wow, I absolutely love this figure, and I'm going to go into all the reasons why, but I actually think he's probably the best in the entire line. Straight away you can see they've thrown everything at this figure. They have given him his leather trench coat, he's got his skull, tactical vest, and the mould is brilliant. This figure is littered with tons of little details. We can just look at the boots here, which are a single plastic piece, which are quite hard, but nevertheless they've got an extra paint wash on there, so we can see lots of muddy details. On the soles, they've actually gone to the trouble of engraving a proper sole for the boots, which is fantastic. Again, another paint wash on there to indicate that he's been through the mud, he's been walking the streets, which is fantastic. His gloves have that extra detailing on there, which look fantastic. And his trench coat is absolutely fantastic. This is so well tailored. It's made of a nice leather effect kind of material, so it's not proper leather of course, but it has that appearance and it has that kind of texture to it, which is really cool. It has little pockets there. They're not functioning pockets, but nevertheless they have sewn them in to give that effect, which is great. And I think, you know, here it might look a little bit padded and a bit strange, but that's because you can close it and you can strap it together with the button there, which is kind of cool. Now there is a reason it looks kind of padded, and that's because underneath this he has of course his tactical vest, his usual Punisher outfit, and then of course he's also loaded down with weapons. So he looks a little puffy here because I've thrown everything at him, but you can strip this down a little bit so it looks a bit more natural and streamlined. At each cuff there is a button there that allows you to open the jacket up so you can get the coat on and off very, very easily. And when you do take it off, you can see now why the coat probably looked a little bit padded, a little bit bulky. Well, that's because he is absolutely loaded down with holsters, weapons, and his actual costume is quite padded anyway. So yeah, that's why. So of course, if you want to dismount some of these weapons, some of these holsters, then that coat would fit a lot tighter, it'd look a lot more streamlined. But yeah, you've got two distinct looks you can go for here, with the trench coat, which is great, or without, and this is equally brilliant. When it comes to the skull logo, that really crucial, important element of this character, there may be mixed feelings. For a start, this has been sewn onto a tactical vest. I personally love this. This feels really appropriate. It does look a little bit amateurish, the way it's been drawn and sewn on there, but for me, that kind of makes it feel a bit more authentic, like a bit more realistic. But I appreciate that some perfectionists out there might think this feels a little bit cheap. I really love this tactical vest. I love that it has these Velcro parts. So the top of the shoulders there, Velcro on and off, so you can remove it if you want. And then on the back, he's got an extra pouch, which again, Velcroed, you can lift that up and it's functioning. You can put something in that if you want. If you want to put some extra grenades, an extra knife or a gun or whatever it might be, there's a place for it. Okay, and then we have the holsters. So you can see these are strapped on here with working straps. The buckles aren't real, they're just a plastic piece, but nevertheless they look pretty good. The molds are nice and neat, and the holsters themselves are pretty cool. They hold the guns in there nice and evenly, and you can place them pretty much wherever you want under those arms, and they look good. Now he does come with a whole host of different weapons here, like we are spoiled for choice, and in the most part they are held in place very nicely by the holsters. This pistol on the left hand side, doesn't fit quite as snugly. It's a little bit loose in that holster, and it's got plenty of detail, not a lot of paint apps to it. There's no extra pieces, you can't pull the clip out or anything like that, but nevertheless it is a nice cool thing to have, and it does fit very easily into the holster there, if it is a little bit loose. On the right hand side we have another pistol, but this is modified, so it has the laser sight attachment as well. Again, a bit more detail on this one, a little bit more paint apps. We can see the silver barrel and the clip there. Really, really like this. This is a great extra to have, and I think it's fantastically done. And this fits very nice and snugly, perfectly into that holster. But that's not all, because we're really just getting warmed up. On his belt at the bottom there, we have a space for a knife. Now, unfortunately, I seem to have misplaced mine, which is really frustrating. But as you can see, the casing is, well worn. It's got the scratches on it, which I think is really cool. Makes it look lived in. But a knife just slides into there, and I can assure you it was nicely detailed and it fit very snugly. Meanwhile, on his right thigh, we have a Desert Eagle in its holster. This is a really huge weapon, and it looks fantastic. A lot more paint apps going on with the silver and the black there. Again, the detailing is very, very nicely done, and it does just Velcro into place as well to hold it in place. I love that. I think it's fantastic. On the other side, on the other leg, we have his shotgun, this Spaz shotgun that is Velcroed into place, just hanging beneath his waist there. Again, the mold on this is absolutely fantastic. I really, really love it. I love the paint apps on it as well, and it actually has a little bit of articulation where that top loader springs up and down. This is absolutely fantastic. I love this. I should note as well that the holsters actually work with the pockets on the side, and you can just slide them around into different positions. So if you want the front of his leg to the side of his leg, even to the reverse, it will completely accommodate that. So this is fantastic. But we're not through looking at the weapons yet, because the Punisher really does come with an armory. Here he has his assault rifle, and I absolutely love this. I love the attention to detail on this. The mold of it is absolutely fantastic. I love that the clip is a double clip that's been sellotaped together. The paint apps are fantastic. We can see that red guide light there, and of course the black and the silver really complementing each other to give this a really textured, layered feel. This is brilliant. And despite only having the one pair of hands, he holds these weapons perfectly. They're so clever the way these hands have been molded, because they can just adapt to all of these guns, and they just look phenomenal. So as you can see, this assault rifle actually has that extended little grip on the side, so he can grab that with both hands. Their finger goes onto the trigger, and it just looks fantastic. I mean, he looks ready for action. And here he is with the shotgun. Once again, we can see that his left hand at the top there can really grip the barrel of the gun, which is fantastic. Meanwhile, his hand is firmly on the grip. Looks really, really cool. Conversely, if you want it at arm level, his hand will again grip the gun perfectly. His finger will rest onto the trigger, which is fantastic. And his other hand can kind of support the central barrel there, but it won't grip it, because that barrel's far too big. He cannot get his fingers around that, and the hand is not malleable at all. It's not rubber, it's a hard plastic, so you don't want to force it, because it would just snap it. So sadly he can't quite get his grip around that, but he can get the very end of the barrel. here he is with two of his pistols, and I just think this looks fantastic. Again, he can hold them both absolutely perfectly. He can get his finger onto the triggers of them, and they just look great. Yeah, fantastic. I can't really criticize this at all. This is just pretty much perfect. Now, in terms of the likeness, this is of course based on the comic book character as opposed to the movie, so it's a bit harder to pin down exactly what kind of image they're going for, what the source material was. But I think we can safely assume they've taken inspiration from John Romita Jr. and Goran Parlov. This is definitely a more beaten up, punished Punisher, if you will. This is a Punisher who's seen a few rounds, he's been on the streets a few years, and he's got a few scars. We can see that scar on his cheek there. He's got the more than 5 o'clock stubble. He looks like he's had a broken nose at some point. I just love this mold. It's absolutely fantastic. This to me kind of summarizes maybe the Punisher Max, kind of, Garth Ennis writing the Punisher. Really, this springs to mind. This is definitely a harder, grittier kind of Punisher than we've seen in some of the comics. Definitely taking on the darker side, and I love it. This is absolutely, for me, is pitch perfect. This is how I think of the Punisher. I think of him being quite gnarly, quite gritty, quite beaten up, because that would absolutely have to be the case for a guy with his lifestyle. So this is absolutely wonderful. I think the mold, the face, the paint apps, all absolutely brilliant, and it tells a story right there. And I just think, yeah, this is a phenomenal sculpt. So how does he stand when it comes to articulation? Well, the answer is pretty good. So he has a ball jointed neck, which means he can spin his neck from side to side, but he can also look up and down a really good distance too. So yeah, top marks for this straight away. Now, I would say he has ball jointed shoulders, but actually his shoulders are really, really weird. And without taking the clothes off, I can't quite show you this, but it's essentially on a giant pin. It's just a big needle. So he doesn't really have a shoulder or ball joint there. It's a giant needle just kind of sticking out where his shoulder should be. It's a bit weird if you ever take the clothes off. You can't really have him, say, bare chested or anything like that, because it just looks too strange. It doesn't look human. So yeah, keep the clothes on, but it does have great articulation. So his arms can lift up and down, they can kick out to the side, all the way back if you wish, and he also has a double jointed elbow, meaning his hand can touch his head, which is fantastic, and there's a swivel at the wrist as well, rotating 360 degrees. Now he does have a swivel at the waist, meaning he can turn from side to side, but there's not an awful lot, there's not a huge range of motion here. There's certainly no ab crunch, and he can't really arch forwards or backwards, it's more just a side-to-side motion. He does have hinge hips, so he can kick his legs right out to the side if you want him to. Looks fantastic. And he can also kick his legs all the way forwards and a really good distance back as well. So this is really strong. He's got double jointed knees, meaning he can kick his heels back quite far. There's a little bit of give on the boot, but I can't tell whether that means that it actually does hinge up and down or whether that's just a bit of looseness between the boot and the foot. And oh yeah, there's one more weapon I forgot to talk about. I saved this to the end. It's absolutely fantastic. He has his Gatling gun. This is absolutely insane. I love this. So the gun is a separate piece, but it's held together by the bullet bandana, which is loose. You can pull this out if you want. This plugs in to the box, which you can load and unload. So in theory, you can push this all the way through and actually have the bullets whizzing past if you wanted to. This is absolutely incredible design. I love this. The paint apps on the bullets are absolutely fantastic. The mold of them are brilliant. They're actually kind of sharp. And even the barrel of the gun rotates. This is absolutely fantastic. I can't praise this highly enough. And yeah, it looks absolutely brilliant. Once again, he can hold it absolutely perfectly. He can hold the handle there and the front handle as well. So this looks perfect. I absolutely love that they gave him this weapon. It is so awesome. It looks so impressive. Just the paint apps, the mold, the way he holds it, it's just wow, it is the icing on the cake. This is a fully loaded Punisher. I don't have enough good things to say about this figure. He's actually probably in my top 10 all-time favourite figures that I've got in my collection. He is absolutely phenomenal. He's kind of tricky to find these days. He's pretty hard to pick up. I was very lucky getting hold of mine on the secondary market. But wow, if you're in two minds about whether to get him or not and you have an opportunity, I'd say grab it. I don't think you would regret it if you're a Punisher fan. For me, yeah, like I said, he's one of my all-time top 10. He's certainly the best Punisher figure I've ever owned, and he's just absolutely fantastic. I love everything about this figure. I really cannot fault it. If I was going to be nitpicking, maybe the packaging ain't great, but wow, the figure itself is just wonderful. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.